Hello, my dear friends. Imagine you arrive not in a forest or an ancient camp, but in a tall brick house standing along a quiet street in the 19th century. The air smells faintly of coal smoke, and the sky above the rooftops is pale with morning fog. This is a Victorian home, and at first it looks comfortable. There are walls, windows, furniture, carpets, and a proper bed. After the hardships of older ages, you might think this life would feel easy, but within minutes you begin to realize something important. The Victorian house is not built for comfort the way a modern home is. It is built around rules, routines, and constant effort. Living here requires discipline from the moment you wake up. Your day begins before sunrise, not because you want to wake early, but because the household does. In a Victorian home, the day starts when the light appears. There are no electric lights to extend the night comfortably. Candles and oil lamps exist, but they are expensive and carefully rationed. So everyone rises with the dawn, whether rested or not. The first sensation you feel is the cold. The bedroom is freezing. Overnight, the fire in the fireplace has died out. Houses of this time do not keep warmth trapped inside. The walls are solid but uninsulated, and cold air enters easily through windows and under doors. Frost sometimes forms on the inside of the glass. You pull heavy blankets away and the air feels sharp against your skin. Getting dressed is not quick. Clothing in this era is layered and structured. Shirts, undergarments, stockings, waistcoats, petticoats, corsets, and outer garments all require time to put on. Buttons and laces take patience. Nothing stretches or slips on easily. Even simple dressing may take 20 minutes or more. Then comes washing. There is no running tap in your bedroom, no shower, no sink with hot water. Instead, a ceramic bowl and pitcher sit on a wooden stand. Water was carried upstairs earlier by someone in the household. Overnight, it has turned icy cold. You wash your face and hands in that water quickly because it is almost painful to keep them in it for long. The bathroom, as you understand it, does not exist here. Indoor plumbing is rare in many Victorian homes. Instead, there is a chamber pot kept under the bed or inside a cabinet. It must be emptied later, carried downstairs, and cleaned manually. This task is part of daily routine and cannot be ignored. Now you leave the bedroom and step into the hallway. The cold follows you. Only certain rooms are heated, usually a sitting room or kitchen. Fireplaces provide warmth, but each fire must be built by hand every morning. Coal or wood must be carried inside, ashes cleared and flames carefully started. Heat does not spread through the house. It stays only near the fire itself. Breakfast is not immediate. Food preparation takes real work. Bread may be sliced from a loaf baked earlier. Tea water must be boiled over the stove. The stove itself burns coal and takes time to heat. Even making a simple cup of tea requires patience, fuel, and attention. The kitchen reveals another reality. Cleanliness is constant labor. Without refrigeration, food spoils quickly. Surfaces must be wiped repeatedly. Milk arrives fresh each day and turns sour if left too long. Meat must be cooked soon after purchase. Nothing can simply be stored and forgotten. As the morning continues, you begin to notice the smell of coal smoke. Nearly every house burns coal for warmth and cooking. The smoke fills streets and sometimes rooms. Curtains darken, walls gather soot, and breathing the air feels heavy. People accept it because there is no alternative. Fresh air means opening a window, which brings cold inside. The noise of the house is different too. No machines hum quietly. Instead, you hear footsteps on wooden floors, the scraping of brushes, the clatter of metal tools, and the crackle of fire. Every task is done by hand, and every action creates sound. By late morning, you already feel tired, though little of the day has passed. The effort of simple living, dressing, washing, heating, and preparing food has taken hours. In a modern home, these things happen almost without thought. Here they demand attention constantly. You begin to understand the first truth about a Victorian house. Comfort exists, but it is earned repeatedly every single day. Warmth must be built. Cleanliness must be maintained. Light must be created. Nothing simply happens on its own, and the day has only just begun. As the morning continues inside the Victorian house, you slowly begin to notice that time itself feels different here. In the modern world, the day flows around convenience. But in this house, the entire rhythm of life follows the sun and the labor required to keep the home functioning. Nothing happens automatically. Every comfort you experience exists only because someone has already worked for hours before you woke. The kitchen becomes the center of activity. The coal stove must remain lit throughout the day, and keeping it alive is not simple. Coal does not burn like a modern gas flame. It must be arranged carefully, fed slowly, and cleaned constantly. Ash builds quickly, and someone must shovel it out regularly so air can circulate and the fire does not suffocate. The heat is uneven. One side of the room feels warm, while the other remains cold. Standing near it warms your hands, but stepping away immediately brings the chill back. Water presents another challenge. There is no hot tap waiting for use. Every drop of warm water must be heated manually. A large metal kettle sits on the stove for long periods, slowly warming. If someone wants a bath later, several heavy containers of water must be heated separately and carried upstairs by hand. The simple idea of washing your whole body requires planning hours in advance. Cleaning fills much of the late morning. Floors are not vacuumed, they are swept repeatedly with stiff brushes. Dust is everywhere because coal smoke enters through chimneys and windows alike. Furniture must be wiped often, or soot settles into every surface. Even clothing gathers dark residue from the air outside. Curtains and carpets trap smoke and must be beaten outdoors to clear them. The work never truly finishes. As soon as one room is clean, another gathers dust again. You also notice the lighting. The rooms are dim even during the day. Windows are smaller than modern ones, and thick curtains help keep warmth inside, blocking light as well. Shadows remain in corners, and reading requires sitting very near a window. When evening comes, candles and oil lamps will replace sunlight, but they are not bright. They flicker, cast moving shadows, and drip wax that must later be scraped away. By midday, meals require attention again. Food cannot be stored easily. Without refrigeration, ingredients arrive fresh and must be prepared quickly. Bread grows stale fast, vegetables wilt, and milk spoils within a day. Cooking itself is careful work. Heat from the coal stove varies, and dishes must be moved closer or farther from the fire constantly. Nothing cooks evenly unless watched. The air inside grows heavy as the day progresses. Coal smoke mixes with cooking smells and damp clothing drying near the fire. Windows may be opened briefly for ventilation, but cold air rushes in immediately. People accept this discomfort because warmth is difficult to maintain. The house feels both warm and chilly at once depending on where you stand. Another detail becomes clear. Silence rarely exists here. Clocks tick loudly on walls because they are wound daily by hand. Doors creak, floorboards shift, and outside the street carries the sounds of horses, wheels, and distant voices. Without engines or electric hum, every small noise becomes noticeable. Night will not be quiet either. Instead, it will bring different sounds, wind, footsteps, and the distant movement of the city. Afternoon tasks continue without pause. Clothing is mended because fabric is valuable and replaced rarely. Socks are darned, buttons sewn back, and garments brushed clean. Even writing a letter takes effort. Ink must be poured carefully, pens dipped repeatedly, and paper kept near light so words can be seen clearly. You begin to feel something unexpected. Fatigue not from a single difficult task, but from constant attention. Every action requires awareness. Fire must not go out. Lamps must not tip. Food must not spoil. Water must not be wasted. Nothing in the house can be ignored for long. And slowly you realize why a modern visitor would struggle here. It is not danger that overwhelms you. It is responsibility. The Victorian home runs only because people work steadily from dawn until night, performing small necessary actions over and over again. The afternoon light fades early through the windows, and as shadows lengthen across the walls, preparations begin for the evening, when the house will demand even more effort to stay warm, lit, and livable after the sun disappears beyond the smoky skyline. As the afternoon slowly slips toward evening, the Victorian house begins preparing for the most difficult part of the day, nightfall. In the modern world, darkness changes very little. Lights come on instantly, rooms stay bright, and daily life continues. Here, the disappearance of the sun transforms the entire house. Once daylight fades, maintaining comfort becomes a constant effort. The first task is lighting. Candles and oil lamps must be prepared carefully. Wicks are trimmed with small scissors so they burn steadily. Lamps are filled with oil slowly to avoid spills. Each flame is precious because fuel costs money and must last. When the first lamps are lit, they do not flood the room with brightness. Instead, they create small pools of warm light surrounded by deep shadow. The edges of the room remain dim, and objects beyond a few steps are hard to see clearly. You immediately notice how differently people move. No one walks quickly after dark. A misstep could knock over a lamp or candle, and fire is a constant danger. Houses of this period burn easily. Wooden floors, heavy curtains, and paper decorations all catch flame quickly. Every person stays aware of where light is placed and moves cautiously around it. Next comes the evening meal. Dinner is the largest meal of the day, but preparing it is slow work. The coal stove has been burning for hours to maintain enough heat. Pots sit directly on iron surfaces, and cooks adjust their position constantly to prevent burning. There are no timers and no steady temperature controls. Food must be watched continuously. A few minutes of neglect could ruin the entire meal. Even serving the food requires coordination. Dishes are heavy, plates must be warmed near the stove, and utensils are polished because tarnish appears quickly in smoky air. Once the meal is ready, everyone gathers in the dining room, where a fire has also been lit in the fireplace. Without it, the room would be far too cold to sit comfortably. The warmth of the fire feels pleasant at first, but the rest of the house remains chilly. When you leave the dining room for even a moment, The hallway greets you with cold air again. Only a few rooms can be heated at once because maintaining multiple fires requires constant fuel and attention. People spend evenings close together in the warmest room simply to stay comfortable. After dinner, washing begins again. Plates and utensils are not placed in a machine. Instead, water is heated manually and poured into basins. Each dish is scrubbed by hand and dried carefully, because moisture left overnight can create odors. The process takes time and effort, and by the end, your hands feel sore from repeated scrubbing. The evening continues with quiet activities. Reading, sewing, letter writing, or gentle conversation fills the hours. Entertainment is simple because there are no screens, no recorded music, and no bright light for detailed work. Many sit near the fire, listening to its steady crackle. Shadows move along the walls as the flames shift. Gradually, fatigue arrives earlier than you expect. The dim lighting strains your eyes. The steady ticking of the clock becomes louder in the silence. Outside, the street grows darker and quieter, interrupted only by the occasional passing carriage or distant footsteps. Night in this house feels long because there is little to distract the mind. Before bed, another ritual begins. Candles are extinguished carefully one by one. Fireplaces are checked so sparks cannot escape. Doors and windows are secured against cold drafts and intruders. Each task matters because the night brings vulnerability. A forgotten flame or open window could create serious trouble before morning. You finally climb the stairs carrying a candle to light the way. Each step creaks beneath your weight, and the hallway above is even colder than before. Bedrooms are unheated. Heavy blankets and thick night clothes will provide warmth, but the air itself remains cold. And as you prepare to sleep, you understand that the Victorian home does not truly rest at night. Instead, it demands constant care, watching flames, guarding warmth, and preparing for the morning when the entire process will begin again from the very first spark of fire. Night inside the Victorian house is very different from the night you know. When you enter the bedroom, the candle you carry becomes your only source of light. Its small flame shakes gently as you move, and the walls seem to shift with long shadows. The hallway behind you disappears into darkness the moment you close the door. Without electricity, darkness is complete and immediate. The bedroom itself is cold again. During the day, fireplaces warmed only a few rooms downstairs, and heat never reached the upper floor. The bed is covered with heavy blankets and quilts, thick enough to trap warmth once you are inside them, but the air around you remains sharp. Some households place a metal pan filled with hot coals, called a bed warmer, between the sheets before sleep to make the mattress bearable. Without it, climbing into bed feels like lying on chilled stone. You set the candle carefully on a small table because it cannot be left unattended. Many fires in this era begin from a candle tipped by accident. People are always aware of flame. Even while preparing for sleep, attention remains constant. Clothing must be folded away from sparks and curtains kept clear of heat. Before sleeping, another routine takes place. The chamber pot is used again because there is no indoor bathroom nearby. During the night, walking downstairs in darkness would be unsafe, especially with cold and narrow staircases. In the morning, it will need to be emptied and cleaned, another daily duty that cannot be forgotten. The sounds of the house become noticeable once everything grows quiet. Wood contracts in the cold, causing soft cracking noises in the walls and floors. Wind moves faintly through small gaps in windows. Outside, horses pass occasionally along the street, their hooves echoing on stone roads. Without modern background noise, every sound feels louder and closer. Sleep itself is lighter than you expect. The cold wakes you at times. The candle must be extinguished before you fully rest, leaving the room completely dark. There is no nightlight, no glowing clock, and no distant city glow entering the window. Only faint moonlight sometimes filters through curtains, barely revealing shapes in the room. Sometime during the early morning hours you wake again, not from alarm but from temperature. The fire downstairs has long gone out and the house has cooled further. You pull blankets tighter, understanding why people wore nightcaps and layered clothing even in bed. Staying warm through the night is a real effort. Eventually, a faint gray light begins to appear at the edges of the window. Dawn arrives slowly, and with it the house will awaken once more. Before anything else, someone must go downstairs to relight the fire. Without it, no warmth, no cooking, and no washing can begin. The entire household depends on that first spark, and so the cycle continues. Morning will bring cold water, heavy clothing, coal smoke, and hours of steady work again. Living here is not dramatic hardship, but it is relentless routine. Comfort exists only because effort repeats every single day without pause. You now understand that surviving even 24 hours in a Victorian house is not about danger or fear. It is about endurance, enduring cold mornings, dim nights, manual labor, and constant attention to the smallest details that keep the home functioning beneath the quiet streets of the 19th century. Morning returns again, and this time you are awake before the household fully rises. The first light is weak and gray, barely reaching into the bedroom, and the cold feels sharper than the evening before. During the night, the fireplaces have gone completely dark and the entire structure of the house has cooled. Floors feel icy beneath your feet as you stand. Even breathing produces faint mist in the air. The very first responsibility of the day is not breakfast, not washing, but fire. Without heat, the entire house cannot function. Someone must go downstairs immediately, carrying kindling, coal, and a small preserved ember or fresh spark. The process is slow and careful. Thin sticks are placed first, then larger pieces, and finally coal arranged above them. Too much coal too soon will smother the flame. Too little will not produce enough heat. The fire must be coaxed gently until it catches properly. You watch how long it takes. Nearly half an hour passes before the room feels slightly warmer. Only then can other tasks begin. Water placed near the fire slowly warms for washing and cooking. Kettles sit patiently, and people wait because rushing changes nothing. Time in this house moves at the pace of physical processes, not convenience. Soon the kitchen fills with movement. Bread is sliced, but not soft the way you expect. Without modern packaging, it has hardened overnight. It may be toasted near the fire to make it easier to eat. Butter spreads unevenly because the room is cold. Tea water finally boils, and the first warm drink of the day feels less like luxury and more like necessity. After breakfast, the house begins its largest effort, maintaining cleanliness. Coal leaves soot everywhere. Even after a single day, black dust settles along windowsills, mantelpieces, and furniture. Brushes and cloths are used constantly. Rugs are taken outside and beaten against rails to shake out dirt. The sound echoes along the street as several homes perform the same task at nearly the same hour. Laundry is another demanding job. There are no machines to wash or spin clothing. Water must be heated in large tubs, soap rubbed into fabric by hand, and garments scrubbed against washboards. The work takes hours, hands grow sore, and sleeves become wet despite care. Afterward, clothing is wrung manually and hung to dry near warmth or outdoors if weather allows. In winter, drying can take an entire day or more. You notice how water is never wasted. Each bucket carried from pump or well required effort. Spilled water means extra trips and more labor. Even simple actions, rinsing a cup, washing a cloth, are done carefully. Throughout the morning, deliveries arrive. A milkman brings fresh milk because storage is impossible beyond a short time. A coal delivery may appear, and heavy sacks are carried inside and stored in a cellar or shed. Without coal, the house would quickly become unlivable in cold weather. Fuel is as important as food. The smell of the home changes as hours pass. Coal smoke mixes with soap, cooking, damp fabric, and polished wood. The scent becomes normal to those who live here, but to you it feels constant and unavoidable. Air inside is thick compared to modern homes. By midday, fatigue sets in again, even though you have done nothing extraordinary. The effort of maintaining ordinary living, heating, cleaning, washing, carrying, fills nearly every hour. Rest exists only between tasks, never completely separate from them. You begin to understand the real challenge of the Victorian house. It does not exhaust you through a single heavy burden. Instead, it asks for endless small work, lifting, scrubbing, tending fires, and preparing food, repeated again and again with little pause. The comfort you see, polished furniture, warm tea, clean clothing, exists only because someone has spent the entire day preserving it. And the afternoon is still ahead, bringing more responsibilities as the household prepares once more for the coming cold evening, when light will fade, and every flame must again be carefully created by hand. By the time afternoon arrives, the house has already been awake and working for many hours, yet the busiest part of the day is not over. The warmth from the morning fire has spread only slightly, and certain rooms still feel cool. Windows gather a faint layer of moisture from the difference between indoor heat and outdoor air. Someone wipes them dry because dampness encourages mold and damage to the wooden frames. Now the focus turns to maintenance. A Victorian house is not something that simply stands and requires little attention. It constantly demands care. Coal fireplaces leave thick soot inside their chimneys, and if left too long, the buildup becomes dangerous. Periodically, someone must brush and clear the grate, carefully removing ash into a metal container. The ash cannot be thrown anywhere. Even a single hidden ember could start a fire hours later. It is carried outside and emptied in a safe place. Then the hearth is reset so the next fire will burn correctly. Furniture also requires regular treatment. Wood is polished with oil or wax to prevent drying and cracking. Tables are wiped carefully because the air of coal smoke settles onto surfaces quickly. Metal items tarnish within days and must be rubbed clean again. The house feels less like a resting place and more like a living system that slowly falls apart, if attention stops even briefly. During the afternoon, clothing is also managed carefully. People of this era own fewer garments than a modern person, so each piece must last a long time. Jackets are brushed to remove dust, boots are cleaned of mud, and leather shoes are polished to protect them from moisture. Even this small routine takes time because dirt from streets, mixed with horse manure and wet soil, clings easily and damages material if ignored. You also notice the importance of daylight. Work is arranged around the sun because artificial light is weak and costly. Sewing, reading, and writing are done near windows while light remains. Chairs are positioned carefully so hands can see thread and needle. Once the sun lowers, such tasks become difficult and sometimes impossible. The house itself makes many small sounds as the day cools. Wooden beams shift slightly, floors creak under changing temperature, and the fire occasionally pops as coal breaks apart. These sounds are normal, yet constant. Silence never truly exists inside a Victorian home. Later in the afternoon, preparation for evening heating begins again. More coal is carried from storage into the living spaces so it will be ready when night comes. This is heavy work. Buckets or scuttles filled with coal are lifted and poured into containers beside each fireplace. A single evening requires significant fuel, and winter requires much more. You realize how closely comfort depends on physical labor. Water is heated once more for limited washing. Full baths are rare because heating that much water takes too much effort and fuel. Instead, small washes happen regularly. Hands, face, and neck are cleaned daily, while full bathing might happen weekly. Cleanliness exists, but it requires planning and strength. Outside, daylight slowly fades. Shadows lengthen across the walls and the rooms begin to dim again. Curtains may be drawn early to keep warmth inside, which makes the house darker still. Lamps will soon be needed. You begin to feel the repetition. Morning fires, cleaning, carrying water, maintaining tools, preparing food, and readying the house for night. All of it happens every day without exception. Missing even one part makes the next day harder. Comfort does not accumulate here, it must be recreated each morning. As evening approaches, someone begins trimming candle wicks and filling lamps again, preparing for the second night you will spend inside this house. Knowing now that darkness will once again change how every movement inside the home must be made. As evening settles again over the street outside, the house prepares carefully for darkness. The sky turns a soft gray, then slowly deep blue, and already activity inside increases. Before night fully arrives, every task that requires clear sight must be finished. Windows are checked, doors secured, and heavy curtains drawn across the glass to keep the cold air from slipping inside. Lighting begins once more. Candles are placed in holders along tables and mantels, while oil lamps are lit in the main rooms. The flames glow warmly, but they do not illuminate the entire space. Instead, they create islands of light surrounded by dimness. Faces near the lamp are visible, but walls farther away fade into shadow. You realize how carefully people must organize their movement. Walking across the room requires watching the floor, because objects easily disappear in low light. The fireplace becomes the center of the home again. Fresh coal is added slowly, never all at once. The fire responds with a low, steady glow and gentle heat spreading outward. Chairs are arranged close to it because sitting even a few steps away brings a chill. Families spend the evening gathered here not simply for company, but because it is the only comfortable place in the house. The evening meal is prepared with the same patience as before. Pots simmer slowly and the cook remains nearby constantly, adjusting position to avoid burning food. Without modern ovens or temperature controls, cooking depends on judgment learned from experience. Even boiling water must be watched, because the fire shifts as coal settles. After eating, the household continues with quiet routines. One person mends clothing beside the lamp, carefully guiding thread through fabric. Another writes a letter, pausing often to dip a pen into ink and hold the page near the light. The ticking clock grows louder as outside noises fade. There is no background sound of machines or electricity, only small human movement and the steady crackle of burning coal. You notice how quickly eyes grow tired. The dim light strains vision, and reading for long periods becomes difficult. Many simply sit and talk softly, or listen to someone read aloud. Entertainment depends on imagination and conversation rather than devices. Cleaning follows again even at night. Dishes are washed carefully and dried immediately so they do not remain damp until morning. The kitchen is set in order because waking to disorder makes the next day harder. Ash from the fireplace is adjusted and the fire arranged so it will last as long as possible into the night. Before bed, preparations grow serious. Lamps are extinguished one by one. Each flame is watched until fully gone. Curtains are checked so they do not hang too close to embers. Doors are bolted, not only for safety but to keep out cold drafts that would cool the house further before morning. Carrying a candle, you walk upstairs again. The staircase creaks under each step. The air upstairs is colder than below because heat rises slowly and escapes easily through the roof. Bedrooms feel almost outdoor in temperature. You prepare for sleep by layering night clothes and blankets once more. The house grows quiet. The final candle is blown out and darkness fills the room completely. You lie beneath heavy covers, hearing faint wind outside and the distant sound of a carriage passing along the street. The fire below continues faintly, watched by no one now, yet depended upon by everyone when morning returns, and you understand that the Victorian home never truly gives effortless comfort. It offers shelter, but only through endless attention. Every warm room, every clean dish, every lit candle exists because someone worked patiently all day to create it and will wake again before dawn to begin the same careful routine once more. Sometime deep in the night you wake again, not to noise but to cold. The warmth from the fireplace below has faded, and the house feels almost as chilled as the outdoors. Victorian homes hold heat poorly, and once the fire weakens, the temperature drops quickly. You pull the blankets tighter around you and notice how heavy they are. Thick wool layers designed not for comfort, but for survival through long winter nights. The darkness is complete. Without streetlights or electric glow, the only light entering the room comes from faint moonlight slipping through the curtain. Shapes appear slowly as your eyes adjust. The wardrobe stands like a shadowed figure, the chair beside the bed barely visible. You realize how dependent you are on sight in your own time, and how here the night truly removes it. Eventually, you hear movement somewhere in the house below. Someone has risen early to begin the fire again. This is common. The first person awake must relight the hearth so the household can function when others rise. Even before dawn, work begins. A faint smell of smoke slowly drifts upstairs as kindling catches. The sound of metal tools and shifting coal echoes softly through the floorboards. Gradually, the house begins to live again. The Victorian day does not wait for comfort. Comfort must be created before the day can even start. You dress quickly, but dressing still takes time. Cold fingers struggle with buttons and laces. Clothing is not optional here. Layers protect not only modesty but warmth. Undershirts, stockings, waistcoats, and outer garments all trap small pockets of air close to the body. Without them, you would remain cold all day. Downstairs, the kitchen feels slightly warmer now that the fire burns steadily. The kettle sits above the flame, slowly heating water. Breakfast preparation begins once more, and the familiar routine repeats. Bread, tea, perhaps porridge warmed carefully over the stove. The smell is comforting, but you understand how much effort stands behind even a simple meal. Outside, early street sounds begin. Horse hooves strike stone roads. Wheels creak as carts pass. A distant vendor calls out morning goods. The house is part of a larger rhythm. Every home along the street is waking the same way, fires being lit, floors being swept, and water being carried. Soon morning cleaning resumes again. Ash from the night's fire must be cleared. Fresh coal arranged. The previous day's dust removed once more because soot never stops entering from chimneys and streets. Windows are briefly opened despite cold so stale air can escape. For a moment fresh air enters, then the chill follows and they close again. You notice how time disappears into maintenance. Hours pass, yet nothing dramatic has happened. Still, you feel tired already. The effort required simply to exist here, to stay warm, clean, and fed, consumes the day before any leisure or rest can appear. And this is the true challenge of the Victorian house. It does not threaten you with danger or dramatic hardship. Instead, it surrounds you with continuous responsibility. Every moment demands small action. Ignore the fire and the house grows cold. Ignore cleaning and soot fills every surface. Ignore preparation and night becomes uncomfortable. By now you understand fully. Surviving 24 hours here is not about courage. It is about patience, endurance, and constant awareness. The house is safe and orderly, yet it never stops asking for your attention from dawn to deep night. Repeating the same quiet labor that defined everyday life for millions living beneath the coal-smoked skies of the 19th century. By late morning of this second day, the house feels familiar to you yet also strangely exhausting. Nothing inside it is broken, nothing is dangerous, and still your energy fades faster than expected. The reason slowly becomes clear. In a Victorian home, rest almost never exists without interruption. Every comfortable moment lasts only until the next responsibility appears. The hallway smells faintly of polish and smoke as someone begins brushing the wooden banister. Surfaces must be maintained constantly because soot from fireplaces settles invisibly throughout the house. Even the staircase gathers fine black dust. Cloths are shaken outside, then brought back to wipe again. Cleaning here is not occasional. It is a daily defense against the environment itself. Midday brings another important task: ventilation. Despite the cold, windows are opened briefly to let stale air escape. Without this, the mixture of smoke, cooking vapor, and damp fabric would become unbearable. Cold air pours inside, and for several minutes the house chills rapidly. People continue their tasks while wearing shawls and coats indoors. Then windows close again, and the long work of warming rooms resumes. You begin to notice how carefully heat is managed. Doors between rooms are kept shut so warmth stays where the fire burns. Rooms not in use remain cold. The house is not heated evenly like modern buildings. It contains pockets of warmth surrounded by cooler spaces, and people move between them depending on activity. In the kitchen, preparation for the next meal already starts. Vegetables are peeled by hand, meat trimmed carefully, and scraps saved for broth. Nothing is discarded easily because food preservation matters. Without refrigerators, leftovers cannot simply be stored indefinitely. Cooking is planned so little is wasted. Water must again be carried. Even indoors, water supply is limited. Someone walks outside to a pump or shared source, fills heavy containers, and brings them back carefully to avoid spilling. The weight strains arms and shoulders, and yet this task happens many times each day. A modern faucet, you realize, replaced an enormous amount of hidden labor. Laundry from earlier is checked. Damp clothing hangs near the fireplace, and pieces are turned by hand to dry evenly. Too close to heat and they scorch. Too far and they remain wet. Everything requires attention and adjustment. As afternoon light shifts across the windows, small repairs continue. A loose button is sewn. A tear in a sleeve is stitched closed. A cracked handle on a tool is tightened. In this era, replacing objects is costly, so repair becomes routine. The house survives because its contents are constantly cared for. Outside, street activity increases. Delivery carts pass. Children's voices echo faintly, and distant factory whistles mark working hours across the city. Even indoors, the household lives connected to these rhythms. Time is not tracked by digital numbers, but by light, sound, and routine. Fatigue returns once again, not sharp exhaustion, but a steady heaviness. You have not faced a single dramatic challenge, yet your body and mind feel worn. The endless repetition of necessary tasks has filled every hour. There has been no long pause, no effortless comfort, no moment when the house simply cared for itself. And you finally understand why 24 hours here feels longer than expected. The Victorian house asks for attention from morning until night, and then again, the next morning. Living here means participating in a cycle of maintenance, warmth, and preparation that never truly stops, quietly shaping daily life beneath the soft gray light of the 19th century afternoon. As afternoon slowly gives way to evening once more, you begin to feel how the entire household prepares for darkness hours before it actually arrives. The sun lowers behind rows of chimneys outside, and long shadows stretch across the floors. Immediately, activity changes. The Victorian day does not end suddenly. It carefully transitions, because once night begins, simple tasks become far more difficult. The first preparation is warmth. Coal is brought again from storage, carried in heavy metal containers, and poured beside the fireplace. Even the sound of coal falling into the scuttle echoes through the room. The fire must be strengthened early, long before the temperature drops. If the household waits too late, the rooms will cool and take hours to warm again. Next comes light preparation. Candles are not simply lit, they are inspected. Old wax is trimmed away and wicks shortened so smoke does not fill the room. Oil lamps are refilled slowly and wiped clean so soot does not darken the glass. These actions are done with calm focus because mistakes waste fuel or create danger. A single overturned lamp could destroy the entire house. Meanwhile, the kitchen becomes active again. Evening meals require time, and the stove must already be hot. Pots are moved across iron surfaces as the cook judges heat by hand rather than by number or dial. Steam rises slowly, carrying the smell of cooking through the hallway. Windows are opened briefly to release excess heat and smoke, but quickly closed to keep warmth from escaping. You begin to notice how movement inside the house grows slower. As daylight fades, people naturally gather into fewer rooms. Carrying a candle from one place to another takes care and attention, so unnecessary trips are avoided. Life becomes centered around the fire-lit sitting room, where warmth and light exist together. After dinner, the familiar washing begins again. Water heated earlier is poured into basins, and each dish is scrubbed carefully. Hands move methodically, not hurried, because chipped plates or broken cups cannot easily be replaced. Cloths are wrung out and hung near the fire so they will be ready for morning. The quiet of evening deepens. Outside, the street sound fades, replaced by occasional carriage wheels or distant voices. Inside, the clock ticks steadily. Without modern distractions, people become more aware of passing time. Conversations soften, and activities slow. You realize how darkness changes behavior. People sit closer together not only for warmth but for light. Reading requires holding a book near the lamp. Sewing happens only within a small bright circle on the table. Beyond that circle, the room fades into shadow. Before night fully settles, final checks begin. Doors are locked, curtains secured, and fireplaces adjusted so embers last safely until morning. Each flame is watched carefully before sleep, ensuring it will not spark beyond its grate. The house feels calm, yet the calm exists only because of preparation. Every comfortable moment depends on actions taken hours earlier: carrying coal, heating water, arranging light, and cleaning spaces. The Victorian home rewards careful attention but never removes the need for it. You sit near the fire, watching the last daylight disappear through the window, and you understand that living here is a continuous partnership between people and their environment. The house protects its occupants, but only because they constantly maintain it. Without their effort, warmth would fade, darkness would grow difficult, and the simple act of spending one full day inside would feel far longer than 24 hours beneath the quiet glow of firelight and candle flame. Night settles fully again, and now you begin to notice something deeper about the Victorian home. The house does not simply hold people inside it. It organizes their lives. Every action follows a pattern shaped by daylight, fuel, and effort. Even when nothing urgent is happening, no one is completely free from responsibility. After the evening cleaning, attention turns toward preparing the house itself for the long hours ahead. The fire in the main room is arranged carefully so it burns slowly. Large pieces of coal are placed in a certain order to last through the night. Too small and the fire dies quickly. Too large and it smothers. The skill comes from habit learned over years, and you see how important experience becomes in a life without automatic systems. In the kitchen, the last warmth of the stove is used wisely. Kettles are filled for morning use so water will warm faster when the fire returns. Bread is covered to slow staling overnight. Utensils are set neatly so morning tasks begin without delay. Nothing is left randomly because the early hours are cold and difficult, and preparation now makes tomorrow easier. Upstairs, bedrooms grow colder as the fire below weakens. You carry a candle once more, watching its light move along the corridor walls. The hallway seems longer at night. Every small sound becomes noticeable: a board shifting underfoot, a faint draft slipping under the door, the distant sound of wind brushing along the outside brick. Before sleep, clothing is arranged carefully. Tomorrow morning, dressing in the cold will be unpleasant, so garments are kept close to the bed. Boots are placed where they can be reached easily. Even this small planning matters in a house where the first moments of the day are the hardest. When you lie down again, you realize how different rest feels here. There is no constant indoor temperature. As the fire lowers, the room cools gradually. You wake briefly more than once, adjusting blankets or pulling them tighter. Sleep becomes a series of quiet pauses rather than one long, uninterrupted rest. Sometime late in the night, rain begins outside. You hear it tapping lightly on the roof and window. The sound is gentle but clear because there are no machines, no electricity, no distant engines to cover it. The entire house seems to listen along with you. The building itself reacts, faint creaks and beams, a soft settling noise as wood responds to moisture and cold. You understand now that the Victorian house is almost alive in its own way. It changes with temperature, weather, and fire. It needs constant human attention to remain comfortable. Without people maintaining it, it would quickly become cold, dark, and unpleasant. As dawn slowly approaches once more, someone wakes early again to begin the fire. The smell of smoke rises faintly through the floorboards, and you know the cycle will begin again exactly as before. Water to heat, rooms to clean, coal to carry, and meals to prepare. And you finally see why surviving even a single full day here feels surprisingly difficult. Not because of danger, but because every hour requires participation. The Victorian house offers safety and shelter, yet it never allows complete rest. Living inside it means working with it constantly, from the first spark of morning fire to the final fading ember deep into the quiet night. Morning comes again through a pale wash of light behind the curtains, and you notice something surprising. You already know what will happen before it happens. The rhythm of the Victorian house repeats so reliably that each day almost feels like an echo of the one before it. Yet even with familiarity, the work does not become easier. Your body still feels heavy as you leave the bed, and the cold air still greets you immediately the moment you step onto the floorboards. Downstairs, the first fire has already been started, but the warmth spreads slowly. You stand near it and realize how small its reach actually is. Only a few feet from the hearth feels comfortable. Step farther back and the chill returns. The house is large compared to the fire, and people must move toward heat rather than expect heat to come to them. Breakfast preparation begins again, and you notice how many separate steps exist behind a simple meal. The stove must be stirred to keep proper flame, the kettle watched until it finally steams, and bread warmed carefully so it softens without burning. Even pouring tea requires patience because cups cool quickly in the cold room. Warmth escapes faster than you expect. After eating, the morning cleaning resumes once more. Ash from the night fire is collected into metal containers and carried outside. The task seems small, but the ash is heavier than it looks, and a single spill leaves dark powder across the floor. The hearth is reset so the next fire burns correctly. Brushes move steadily across floors, lifting dust created by soot drifting from chimneys across the city. Soon water must be brought in again. You step outside briefly and feel the difference immediately. The outdoor air is colder, yet fresher than inside. The pump handle is heavy, and drawing water takes effort. The bucket fills slowly, and lifting it requires careful balance to avoid spilling. You understand now that even a cup of water inside the house has a physical cost attached to it. Laundry from the previous day is checked and turned. Some garments remain damp and must stay near the fire longer. The room smells faintly of drying fabric and soap. Everything dries gradually because heat is gentle, not forced. There is no quick solution here. Time and patience complete the process. Throughout the late morning, the house demands small attention again and again. Coal is added to the fire. A window is wiped dry from condensation. Boots near the door are brushed clean. A loose curtain tie is repaired. Each task seems minor alone, but together they fill hours. There is no long period when nothing needs doing. You begin to feel how the house shapes behavior. People move deliberately, not because they wish to be slow, but because haste creates extra work. A knocked cup means more washing. A poorly tended fire means cold rooms later. Carefulness saves effort in the future. By midday, light grows stronger through the windows, and for a short time the house feels almost peaceful. Sunlight warms the glass and brightens the rooms without fuel or flame. For this brief period, the home asks less from its occupants. Yet even now, someone prepares for the afternoon, checking fuel, arranging tools, and planning the next meal before shadows return. And you understand that this is the true challenge. The Victorian house does not punish mistakes dramatically. Instead, it quietly increases work if neglected. Comfort exists only through continuous small actions repeated every single day. Living here means never fully stepping away from responsibility, because the moment attention stops, cold, darkness, and disorder slowly return. The afternoon stretches gently across the day, and for the first time you begin to notice how the Victorian house controls not only work, but movement. People rarely wander from room to room without purpose. Each space has a function, and using it carelessly creates extra effort later. Doors are opened and closed quickly to preserve warmth, and even walking across the house is done with intention. In the sitting room, sunlight enters through the front windows and briefly warms the carpet. Chairs are turned slightly toward the light so sewing and reading can continue while visibility lasts. This hour of daylight is valuable. Hands work steadily because once the sun lowers, detailed tasks become difficult. You see how people use natural light almost like a resource that must be spent wisely before it disappears. Meanwhile, the kitchen continues its quiet labor. Vegetables are prepared slowly and scraps are saved carefully. Nothing is thrown away immediately. Peelings may be used in broth, stale bread toasted again, and leftover meat stretched into another meal. Food here is not convenience, and it is planning. Without preservation and careful use, supplies would run out quickly. You step briefly into a room not used often and feel the difference at once. The air is noticeably colder. Furniture there sits untouched and slightly dusty. This reminds you that the Victorian house is not uniformly lived in. Families stay mostly within a few warmed areas because heating every space would require enormous fuel and effort. The rest of the house waits quietly, almost dormant, until needed. In the hallway, boots and coats near the entrance are brushed clean. Outdoor dirt cannot be ignored because streets carry mud, soot, and animal waste. Cleaning them now prevents floors from becoming harder to maintain later. Even entering the home is part of the daily routine. Afternoon also brings maintenance of light sources. Candles are inspected again. Melted wax from previous nights is trimmed away, and holders cleaned so flames burn safely. Lamp glass is wiped clear of soot because smoke dims already weak light. Evening comfort depends on preparation done hours earlier. You begin to understand how forward-thinking life here must be. The household always prepares for the next period of the day, rather than focusing only on the present moment. Afternoon work protects evening comfort. Evening preparation protects the next morning. Nothing exists separately, and each part of the day connects to the next. Outside, Distant factory whistles and carriage wheels remind you that the city around the house follows similar rhythms. Many homes perform the same actions at nearly the same time: cleaning steps, tending fires, preparing meals. The entire neighborhood moves according to daylight and necessity. As the sun slowly lowers again, shadows lengthen across the walls. The warmth from sunlight fades quickly, and the familiar preparations begin once more. Coal is gathered, curtains readied, and lamps positioned. The house anticipates night long before it arrives. You now see why 24 hours inside this home feels so long. There is never a moment when life pauses completely. Instead, the day flows through an endless chain of small responsibilities. The Victorian house stands sturdy and proper, yet it depends entirely on human effort to remain comfortable, guiding every movement and shaping every hour from morning light to evening shadow. By now, the second evening inside the Victorian house no longer feels unfamiliar, yet it feels heavier. Not because the work has grown harder, but because you understand there is no true finish to it. The cycle does not end when the sun sets. It simply shifts into another form. The late afternoon light fades once again, and you watch how quickly the house reacts. Curtains are drawn tightly across the windows to keep out the growing cold. The difference is immediate. Without the thin layer of sunlight, the air begins to cool within minutes. Coal is added to the fireplace before the chill can spread too far, and someone kneels carefully to adjust the grate so airflow feeds the flame correctly. Even the sound of iron tools against metal becomes familiar. The sitting room gathers its occupants once more. Chairs are pulled close to the hearth. A small table is moved nearer to the lamp because its circle of light will soon be the only bright space in the room. Movements grow deliberate. No one wastes steps walking into colder corners unless necessary. Dinner preparation begins again with the same careful judgment. The cook listens to the fire as much as watches it. The crackle of coal, the color of flame, and the way heat radiates from iron all guide decisions. There is no mechanical control, only experience and patience. Steam rises from pots, carrying the scent of vegetables and broth. It fills the air, then slowly disappears toward the ceiling where it meets cooler drafts. After eating, the washing returns as always. Plates are scrubbed in heated water, dried immediately, and placed back into cupboards that must remain orderly. The rhythm is steady and repetitive. Cloth against ceramic, water poured from kettle, hands moving without pause. These sounds are small, yet they define the life inside the house more than any grand event ever could. Outside, night deepens. The street grows quiet except for occasional carriage wheels echoing faintly on stone. Inside, lamps glow softly, casting warm halos around faces and furniture. The rest of the room sits in shadow. You begin to feel the limitation of light more strongly now. Your eyes strain slightly. Reading becomes slower. Sewing requires intense focus. The fire provides comfort, yet it demands attention. Coal must be adjusted periodically. If neglected, it weakens or smokes. Someone rises from their chair every so often to tend it. Even rest beside the hearth includes responsibility. As bedtime approaches, final tasks begin once more. The fire is arranged carefully for the night. Lamps are extinguished one by one. Candles are pinched out gently to avoid scattering sparks. Doors are locked, curtains checked again, and floors inspected for stray embers or cloth too near heat. Nothing is left to chance. You climb the stairs again, candle in hand, feeling the familiar cold waiting upstairs. The warmth never fully reaches these rooms. Heavy blankets and layered clothing remain your only defense. The house feels quiet, yet not inactive. Wood shifts slightly in cooling air. The last coal below glows faintly. Lying in bed, you understand something fully now. The Victorian house is not simply a structure people live in. It is a system that requires constant cooperation. It gives warmth only if you feed it fuel. It gives light only if you prepare flame. It gives comfort only if you clean and maintain it daily. 24 hours here are not defined by danger or drama, but by endurance. Enduring repetition, physical effort, cold mornings, dim evenings, and the steady labor required to keep ordinary life functioning. The house stands proud and orderly, yet it never carries its occupants forward effortlessly. Every day must be built by hand, from the first spark at dawn to the final ember fading in the quiet dark. Before sunrise arrives again, you wake one last time in the Victorian bedroom. The room is silent and cold, the kind of cold that makes you hesitate before leaving the blankets. The night fire has faded to ash, and the warmth that once filled the sitting room below has completely disappeared from the upper floor. For a moment, the house feels almost abandoned, yet you already know what will happen next. Footsteps sound faintly downstairs. Someone has risen early once again, long before daylight, to rebuild the fire. You hear the careful movements, the metal grate being opened, the quiet placement of kindling, the soft scrape of a match, and then the slow return of flame. This single act begins the entire day. Without it, nothing else in the house can function. You dress slowly in the dim light filtering through the curtains. Your hands are stiff from the cold, and fastening buttons takes longer than you expect. Clothing here is not just appearance. It is protection from the indoor temperature itself. Each layer traps a little warmth, and without them the day would feel unbearable. Downstairs, the kitchen shows the familiar morning scene. The fire has grown steady, and the kettle rests above it, waiting for water to heat. The room feels slightly warmer, though still far from comfortable. Everyone gathers close to the hearth while waiting, not speaking much, conserving energy while the day begins. Breakfast repeats its simple routine: warmed bread, tea, perhaps porridge, prepared patiently as always. The meal is not elaborate, yet it requires attention from start to finish. Nothing here can be left unattended, not even boiling water. Even eating is done carefully because crumbs mean extra cleaning later. Soon after the daily cycle returns, ash must be cleared, coal carried in again, floors brushed, water fetched, windows wiped where condensation forms overnight. These actions no longer surprise you. Instead, they feel endless. The house always returns to the same needs, no matter how well yesterday's work was completed. You step briefly outside once more and feel the fresh air, realizing how different the interior atmosphere has become to you. Inside the home, smoke, warmth, and dampness mix constantly. Outside feels sharper, but cleaner. Yet life cannot remain outdoors. The house is necessary shelter, and so people return inside to maintain it again. By late morning, you feel something deeper than tiredness, a steady mental fatigue. The work is not dramatic, yet it requires continuous attention. There is no button to press, no switch to flip. Every comfort comes from hands performing repeated tasks. Warmth, light, food, and cleanliness all exist only because someone works to create them daily. You finally understand the meaning of surviving 24 hours here. The Victorian house is safe, structured, and even respectable, yet it demands constant participation. It offers protection from the outside world, but only in exchange for steady labor and discipline. The day continues around you as it always will for those who live here. Fires burn, floors are swept, and meals are prepared again. Life inside the house moves forward quietly, shaped by routine and necessity. And as you watch the morning light fill the windows once more, you realize the greatest challenge was never danger. It was endurance, the unending effort required simply to live an ordinary day within the careful, coal-warmed walls of a Victorian home. By the time the afternoon arrives again, you begin to notice the smallest details more clearly than before. Living inside the Victorian house has slowed your awareness. Without machines doing tasks quietly in the background, every process reveals itself. You hear water heating, wood expanding, coal settling, and cloth brushing across surfaces. Nothing in the house happens silently. The sitting room grows slightly warmer as the fire strengthens, yet warmth never spreads evenly. Your feet remain cool while your face feels heated by the flames. People adjust constantly, moving chairs a few inches closer, stretching hands toward the fire, then stepping back when it grows too hot. Comfort here is not fixed. It is negotiated throughout the day. Attention now turns to preparation for the next night, even though the sun is still visible outside. Extra fuel is brought in early. The coal scuttle is filled again and placed beside the hearth. Carrying it leaves faint dust along the floor, which must be swept immediately. Coal touches everything: the air, clothing, and skin. After handling it, hands are washed in a basin because dark residue lingers easily. In the kitchen, food planning begins hours before eating. Ingredients cannot be stored long, so decisions are made carefully about what to cook today and what must be used first. A pot is placed on the stove early, so it warms slowly. Unlike modern cooking, heat cannot be summoned instantly. It must be anticipated. You also notice how the household measures time differently. No one checks a device. Instead, time is known through experience. The position of sunlight across the floor, the sound of a nearby factory whistle, or the length of shadow stretching along the wall. The large clock in the hallway ticks steadily, wound by hand each day. Its sound becomes part of the house itself, marking hours with calm regularity. Clothing worn during the day is brushed again before evening. Dust from streets and soot from chimneys cling to fabric quickly. If left overnight, it would settle deeper and become harder to remove. Even personal appearance requires maintenance, not vanity, but practicality. Clean garments last longer. Later, a small but important task takes place: preparing the bed for the coming night. Blankets are shaken to remove cold air trapped in them. Sometimes a warmed brick or metal pan heated near the fire is placed briefly between sheets to soften the chill before sleep. Without this, the first moments in bed would feel unbearable during colder seasons. As daylight fades, lamps are checked once more. Oil is topped up and glass chimneys wiped clear so the flame burns steadily. Every evening repeats this ritual. You realize that light itself here is a daily creation, not a constant presence. The house grows quieter as the sky darkens. Activities narrow again to the main room near the hearth. People sit together, working with their hands or speaking softly. Outside, the street fades into darkness. but inside the small circle of firelight, life continues. You sit watching the fire and finally understand why modern visitors would struggle here. The Victorian house does not offer instant comfort. Instead, it asks for cooperation with every physical reality: cold, darkness, time, and effort. The home functions only when people give it attention hour after hour. The flame flickers gently, shadows move across the walls, and another evening settles over the house, carried forward by the same careful routine that has repeated every single day within these steady brick walls. As night returns once again, you begin to notice how the Victorian house changes character after dark. During the day, it feels busy and practical, but at night, it becomes quiet and watchful. The same rooms appear smaller when lit only by flame. Shadows stretch longer across the floor, and every object seems softer in shape beneath candlelight. The evening gathering around the fire begins as usual. Chairs are drawn closer together, not only for warmth, but also because the circle of light is limited. Beyond it, the corners of the room fade into darkness. People naturally remain within that glowing space, speaking quietly or working with their hands. Someone mends a sleeve, carefully guiding needle and thread near the lamp so the stitches can be seen. Another polishes a pair of boots, brushing away dried street dust gathered during the day. The fireplace requires steady attention. Every so often, someone rises to adjust a piece of coal or move ash aside so the flame breathes properly. The fire is comforting, yet never independent. It cannot be ignored for long. The moment it weakens, the room cools quickly. Warmth here depends on patience rather than power. Outside, the street has grown still. No electric lamps line the road, only occasional lanterns carried by passers-by. Through the window, you see faint movement and hear distant footsteps echo along the stone pavement. Inside, the large hallway clock marks each passing minute with a slow, steady tick. Without modern noise, the sound becomes part of the atmosphere, filling quiet pauses in conversation. Eventually, preparations for sleep begin again. Dishes are washed, dried, and placed carefully away. The last kettle of warm water is poured into basins for quick washing. Hands and faces are cleaned before bed because the next opportunity may not come until morning. Towels are hung near the hearth to dry overnight. One by one, the lamps are extinguished. Each flame is pinched or covered gently so smoke does not spread. The room darkens gradually with every light that disappears. Only the fireplace remains, glowing softly. Before leaving, someone arranges the coals so they last as long as possible, and checks the floor around it for stray sparks. You carry a candle upstairs again. The hallway is colder now than earlier, and your breath shows faintly in the air. Every step on the staircase produces a soft creak, louder in the silence. Reaching the bedroom, you place the candle down carefully and prepare for sleep in the now familiar cold. The bed feels heavy with blankets. You slip beneath them and slowly warmth gathers around you. The house quiets completely. Below, the final embers glow unseen, and outside, the night air presses gently against the windows. Lying there, you finally understand the deepest challenge of the Victorian house. It is not one difficult task, but an unending chain of small responsibilities that never pause. Every day begins with fire and ends with fire. Every comfort, heat, light, food, and cleanliness exists only because someone constantly works to maintain it. And as you drift toward sleep in the dim stillness, the house rests only briefly, waiting for dawn when the first footsteps will again descend the stairs, and the entire careful routine will begin once more. Before the sky has fully brightened, the house begins its familiar awakening again. You do not need a clock to know the hour. The quiet sounds from below, the opening of the hearth grate, the faint clink of metal tools, the soft stir of kindling, announce morning more clearly than any alarm ever could. In the Victorian house, dawn is not a time displayed on a screen. It is a series of actions repeated every single day. You rise from the bed and immediately feel the cold once more. Overnight, every trace of yesterday's warmth has faded from the upper floor. The blankets provided comfort only while you remained inside them. Now the air presses sharply against your hands and face. Dressing becomes the first real task of the morning, not simply preparing to be seen, but preparing to function. Layers trap warmth close to the body, and without them, even simple movement feels difficult. Downstairs, the fire has begun to grow again. A thin column of smoke climbs the chimney while the first flames take hold of the coal. You stand near the hearth and feel the slow return of heat. It does not appear instantly. It arrives gradually, spreading outward inch by inch. Everyone naturally gathers near it, waiting as much as working, because the day cannot properly start until the house is warm enough to use. Water is placed above the fire and begins heating. The kettle hums softly as the temperature rises. There is patience in this waiting, a quiet acceptance that nothing can be rushed. While it warms, other chores begin, the sweeping of yesterday's dust, wiping the mantel and clearing the last ash from the grate. Even the simple act of removing ash requires care so it does not scatter into the air. Breakfast follows the same careful pattern you now know well. Bread warmed near the stove, tea poured slowly, and utensils set out deliberately. The meal feels small compared to the effort behind it. Yet the warmth of the drink spreads through your hands, and you understand why such a simple comfort meant so much. Soon after, someone steps outside to collect fresh water again. The door opens briefly, letting cold air sweep inside. For a moment the warmth retreats, and coats are pulled tighter. Then the door closes, and the fire must once again rebuild the lost heat. Even a few seconds of open air changes the entire room. Late morning tasks continue steadily. Laundry from earlier days is checked, turned, and moved closer to the hearth. Floors are brushed again because soot never stops entering from chimney smoke drifting across the city. Windows are wiped where moisture gathers from warm air meeting cold glass. Every action protects the house from discomfort or damage. You begin to feel how the home depends on constant awareness. No one ignores the fire, the water, or the light. Every system requires human attention. The house gives safety and shelter, but only as long as people actively support it. By midday, sunlight returns through the windows and softens the rooms naturally. For a short time, the house seems easier to live in. Yet even now, preparation begins again, planning fuel for evening, arranging tools, and considering the next meal before hunger even arrives. And in that steady rhythm, you realize why lasting here is harder than expected. The Victorian house never becomes effortless. It asks for participation from morning until night, shaping every hour around warmth, light, and maintenance. Life inside it is calm and orderly, yet it depends entirely on repeated work, carried out day after day beneath the quiet gray light of the 19th century. By now, the hours have begun to blend together. You wake, warm the house, clean, cook, carry, prepare, and then repeat. The Victorian home does not change much from one day to the next. And that sameness is exactly what makes it difficult. There is no moment when the house simply runs on its own. Even a calm afternoon requires attention. As the sun moves across the sky, its light becomes a guide for activity. People shift their work toward whichever window holds the strongest daylight. A chair is pulled closer to the glass so sewing can continue without straining the eyes. Paper is placed carefully on a table where sunlight reaches. The house itself seems to follow the sun, not through machinery, but through human adjustment. You notice the smell of the house more clearly now. Coal smoke lingers faintly in the curtains and rugs. Polished wood adds a warm scent, and soap from washing hangs in the air near drying clothes. These smells never fully disappear. Instead, they become the atmosphere of daily life. Breathing inside feels heavier than outdoors, yet it is accepted as normal because warmth depends on it. Afternoon also brings preparation for clothing. Garments worn through the morning are brushed again. A small hand brush removes dust from sleeves and collars. Shoes are checked and wiped clean of street dirt. Wet mud left to dry would harden and damage leather. Caring for clothing is not luxury here. It prevents replacement, which would be costly and difficult. You also begin to understand how carefully belongings are treated. A broken cup cannot easily be replaced. A torn coat must be mended immediately. A damaged chair is repaired rather than discarded. The house holds objects meant to last many years, and every person helps preserve them. Soon someone begins bringing in more coal before evening. The metal container scrapes lightly along the floor as it is set beside the hearth. Small black dust marks appear and are brushed away quickly. Even preparing fuel creates more cleaning. Every action in the house connects to another task that follows it. Late afternoon quiet settles in. Outside, distant carriage wheels and faint voices drift along the street. Inside, the clock ticks steadily, marking time in a slow and gentle rhythm. You begin to feel how time stretches here. Without sudden distractions, hours feel longer. The day is measured not by quick events but by gradual changes. Light fading, rooms cooling, and fires needing attention again. You sit near the window watching the sunlight fade across the floorboards. The warmth from the sun disappears faster than expected, and already someone moves toward the fireplace to prepare it. Night is coming again, and with it, the need to rebuild comfort once more. And you finally understand that the challenge of 24 hours in a Victorian house is not any single hardship. It is continuity. The work never truly ends. Each completed task quietly leads to the next. Warmth must be created, light prepared, water carried, and order maintained again and again. The house stands calm and proper around you, yet it relies entirely on human effort, shaping every moment into a careful routine beneath the slowly dimming light of another approaching evening. Evening arrives once more, and now you understand the pattern before it begins. The house prepares itself through the actions of its occupants long before darkness fully appears. The last sunlight fades across the windows, and immediately the familiar movements start again. Coal is placed near the hearth, lamps are checked, curtains are drawn, and chairs are pulled closer to the warmth. The fireplace becomes alive once more. A new layer of coal settles onto the glowing embers, and slowly the flames strengthen. The heat spreads outward, but only a short distance, so everyone gathers within its reach. The rest of the house remains cooler and quieter. It feels as though life exists only in the circle of firelight, while beyond it the rooms rest in shadow. The evening meal is prepared with the same care as every meal before it. The stove warms gradually and food cooks at the pace allowed by the fire rather than by desire. Steam rises gently, carrying warmth into the air. You realize how much patience shapes daily life here. Nothing can be hurried without consequence. A rushed fire smokes, a rushed meal burns, and a rushed task creates more work later. After eating, washing begins again. Warm water is poured into basins, dishes are scrubbed by hand, and cloths are hung carefully to dry. The process is steady and repetitive, almost calming in its rhythm. The house grows quieter with each passing minute as night deepens outside. Lamps glow softly around the room. Their light is gentle, not bright, and people naturally stay close together. Reading is slow and deliberate. Sewing requires careful focus. Conversations happen in low voices because silence fills the house so easily. Without electric light or machines, night feels larger and more present. Soon preparations for sleep return. The fire is arranged so it lasts as long as possible without becoming unsafe. Each candle is extinguished one by one, leaving the room dimmer each time. The final lamp is turned down and the staircase awaits once again. You climb the steps slowly, carrying a small flame to guide the way. The air grows colder with every step upward. Reaching the bedroom, you prepare for bed the same way as before, placing clothing nearby for morning, settling beneath heavy blankets, and letting the warmth slowly gather around you. The house becomes still. The last embers glow below, unseen but trusted to hold enough heat for the early hours. Outside, the street rests in darkness, and only faint sounds travel through the quiet night air. Now, after living through this full cycle, you finally understand why surviving even a single day here feels so demanding. The Victorian house offers safety, shelter, and order, but it requires constant cooperation. Warmth comes only from tending fire. Cleanliness comes only from repeated work. Light comes only from careful preparation. Nothing exists without effort. Life inside this home is not dramatic hardship. Instead, it is steady endurance. Small tasks repeated from morning until night, every day, without pause. And as you close your eyes in the cold, quiet room, you realize the greatest challenge was never danger at all, but the endless responsibility of maintaining comfort in a world where every simple necessity had to be created by hand, again and again, within the calm, coal-scented stillness of a Victorian house. Another morning begins, and now the routine feels almost predictable, yet your body still reacts to it as if it were new. The cold wakes you before you are ready. The blankets protected you through the night, but stepping out from them reminds you immediately that warmth in this house is temporary. Without fire, the building quickly returns to the temperature of the outside air. Downstairs, the first person has already begun rebuilding the hearth. The sound of coal being placed carefully onto small flames reaches you before the light does. You descend the stairs and see the familiar sight. Someone kneeling beside the grate, coaxing the fire patiently, feeding it little by little so it grows rather than dies. This quiet moment is the true beginning of the day. Every task that follows depends on this one success. You stand near the hearth and feel the slow return of heat. It does not spread quickly. Instead, it gathers around the fireplace and gradually fills the room. People position themselves close to it while waiting for the kettle to warm. The entire house pauses during this time because until water heats and light strengthens, Little else can be done comfortably. Breakfast preparation follows, simple but deliberate. Bread warmed again, tea poured, and small utensils arranged neatly on the table. You notice how nothing is rushed, even though the day has already begun early. Haste wastes effort here. Spilled water means another trip outside. Burned food means more preparation. Patience is the easiest way to reduce work. After the meal, the household moves into its familiar cycle. Ash is removed from the fireplace and carried out carefully. Floors are brushed once more, lifting soot that settled overnight. The windows, faintly fogged by indoor warmth meeting cold glass, are wiped dry with cloths. Each task repeats daily because yesterday's effort never lasts forever. Someone steps outdoors to collect water again. The pump handle creaks as it moves and the bucket fills slowly. Carrying it back requires steady hands. Even the smallest spill leaves work behind. You begin to understand why people move carefully. Clumsiness here multiplies labor. Late morning brings quiet industry. Clothing is checked and mended where needed. A loose thread is stitched before it becomes a tear. Boots are cleaned before mud hardens into leather. Tools are placed where they will be ready later. The house remains orderly because disorder would quickly create more tasks. Sunlight eventually brightens the windows and gives a short period of relief. For a little while, warmth comes freely without coal. The rooms feel lighter, and the need for lamps disappears. Yet even during this calm, preparations begin again for the next stage of the day. Fuel is checked, food planned, and space is organized, so evening will not become difficult. You realize now that the Victorian house never truly pauses. Even in its quietest hours, it requires attention. It asks its occupants to anticipate the future constantly, warming rooms before cold arrives, preparing light before darkness falls, and cleaning before dirt spreads. And as the morning continues, you understand why lasting more than a day here feels challenging. The house provides safety and structure, but it demands participation in return. Every moment of comfort must be built, maintained, and protected, shaping daily life into a steady rhythm beneath the pale daylight of another 19th century morning. The afternoon settles gently across the house again, and you begin to notice how much of Victorian life depends on anticipation rather than reaction. The household is never simply living in the present hour. Instead, every action quietly prepares for the next part of the day. Long before night arrives, the work of evening has already begun. The sitting room receives the most attention. Curtains are checked so they will close smoothly when the sun lowers. Lamps are brought forward from shelves and inspected. The glass chimneys are wiped clear of soot because even a thin film makes the already weak light dimmer. Wicks are trimmed carefully with small scissors so they burn steadily and do not smoke. These tasks seem minor, yet without them the night would feel darker and more uncomfortable. Meanwhile, the fireplace is cleared and reset once again. Yesterday's ash is removed fully, and the grate is adjusted so air can move freely through the coals. Fresh fuel is placed nearby in preparation. The fire is not yet lit strongly, but everything must be ready because once evening arrives, there will be little daylight to work by. You step into the hallway and feel the difference in temperature between rooms. The sitting room is comfortable, but only a few steps away the air grows cooler. Victorian houses do not hold even warmth. They contain warm islands surrounded by cooler spaces. People naturally remain near heat, shaping their movement around it. Even walking across the house becomes a deliberate decision rather than a casual one. In the kitchen, preparation continues quietly. A pot is placed near the stove long before cooking begins so it warms slowly. Vegetables are washed and cut while daylight still fills the window. Once lamps are needed, delicate work becomes harder. The cook uses every remaining minute of natural light. You notice again the constant presence of soot. A thin layer gathers on the mantel and windowsill, even though they were cleaned earlier. A cloth passes across them once more. The effort feels repetitive, yet necessary. Without daily care, surfaces would darken quickly. The city outside burns coal continuously and the smoke reaches every home. Water is carried inside again before dusk. Buckets are filled while outdoor light remains because fetching water at night would be difficult and unsafe. Each container is placed carefully where it will be needed later. Even washing hands or preparing tea tomorrow morning depends on this preparation now. As the sun lowers, the color of the rooms changes. The warm afternoon light fades to a softer tone. Shadows lengthen across the floorboards and furniture. Someone closes the curtains to hold in warmth, and instantly the interior dims. Lamps are lit one by one, their glow filling small circles of space. The house gently shifts into night mode, not suddenly, but through careful action. You begin to understand the true challenge. The Victorian house never allows forgetfulness. Every part of daily life requires remembering fuel, remembering water, remembering light. Comfort depends not on convenience, but on attention. And as evening settles fully and the house gathers around the fire once more, you realize that lasting here is difficult because the work is quiet and continuous. Nothing dramatic happens, yet every hour requires participation. The home protects those inside it, but only because they never stop working with it, maintaining its warmth and order beneath the soft glow of lamplight and the steady ticking of the clock. Night has settled once again over the street outside, and the Victorian house grows calm. The curtains are drawn, the lamps glow softly, and the fire gives its steady warmth to the small circle of life gathered around it. After watching this home through a full cycle of day and night, you now understand its quiet truth. The house never intended to make life easy. It was built to make life possible. The final chores of the evening move slowly and carefully. The last dishes are washed and dried by hand, then placed neatly into cupboards. The kitchen is set in order for the morning, because beginning a day in disorder would make the cold early hours harder. The kettle is filled and left ready beside the stove. Small preparations like these matter greatly here. Morning comfort depends on night effort. The fire is tended one last time. A few pieces of coal are placed gently onto the glowing embers so they last as long as possible into the night. Ashes arranged so sparks cannot escape. Someone kneels quietly, watching the flame a moment longer than necessary, making sure it will remain safe while everyone sleeps. Fire is warmth, light, cooking, and survival all at once, and it is treated with care every single day. Lamps are dimmed and then extinguished one by one. Each disappearing light deepens the darkness of the room. Shadows stretch across the walls, and the house becomes still. The hallway clock continues its slow ticking, marking the passing of time in a way that feels almost gentle compared to the constant motion of modern life. You carry a candle upstairs for the last time. The staircase creaks softly under your steps, and the upper floor greets you with familiar cold air. The bedroom waits quietly, unchanged, prepared only by blankets and layered fabric to provide warmth. You place your clothing within reach for the morning, because you now understand how difficult dressing will feel when the air is cold again. Settling into the bed, the heavy covers gradually trap warmth around you. The room is dark, lit only by faint moonlight through the curtains. Outside, the city rests under the night sky. Inside, the last embers glow faintly below, slowly fading. And now, after sharing this full day, you finally see why surviving even 24 hours here would be challenging. Not because the Victorian house was cruel or dangerous, but because it required constant effort. Every comfort had to be created. Warmth came from carrying coal. Cleanliness came from steady scrubbing. Light came from prepared flame. Even water came from patient labor. Life here was orderly, structured, and calm, yet it never paused. The people who lived in these homes were not struggling dramatically every moment. They were enduring quietly, repeating small tasks with discipline day after day. The house gave shelter, but only in partnership with those inside it. So as the night grows quiet and the last warmth fades into stillness, we gently step away from the coal-lit rooms and soft ticking clock of the 19th century. The Victorian home rests behind us, its careful routines continuing without us, just as they once did for countless families living their ordinary lives beneath the dim glow of candlelight. And if you enjoyed this slow, peaceful journey into the past, you can softly support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. And you may share which time in history you would like to visit next. Good night and rest well.